Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Councilors of Real Estate, welcome to this special presentation of LA Fires, What Happened and Why, Part 2. Thank you for joining us. My name is John Bicheski, and I'm currently the first Vice Chair of the Councilors of Real Estate and President of Real Estate Fiduciary Services in Somerville, South Carolina. The Councilors of Real Estate is a global organization of commercial property advisors addressing real estate challenges worldwide. Experienced, innovative, principled, and credentialed problem solvers. Counselors reside in 22 countries, practice in many more, and offer expertise in 60 real estate disciplines across all asset classes. Each has earned the prestigious CRE designation, representing a badge of distinction and a commitment to excellence. Let's recognize the exclusive sponsors for this event: Equus Capital Partners and RELPI. Thank you both for your partnership. Before we begin, I want to offer you a free digital subscription to the Counselor's peer-reviewed professional journal, Real Estate Issues. It's been named one of the top 10 essential real estate publications in the U.S. Please visit cre.org/REI to subscribe. You're encouraged to utilize the question and answer feature should you wish to submit a question. Your participation is welcomed, and we will answer as many questions as time allows. I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Steve Norris, CRE, Principal of Norris Realty Advisors in Pasadena, California. In 2021, Steve led the CRE Counseling Corps team that advised the town of Paradise, California, and the Paradise Association of Realtors following the devastating Camp Fire in 2018. The team continues to confer with local stakeholders today. Steve was invited to membership in the Counselors in 2002. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, John. And thank you to everyone attending the webinar today and to our speakers. We've got almost 200 people on the call, and our response to our first call was very positive. Very thankful for all your feedback, interesting questions. We've got some advanced interesting questions today. And today we're going to touch very briefly, and you know, with the hour format, it's kind of an inadequate amount of time to deal with the complexity of issues as we encountered also in the Paradise Fire. But what we're going to talk about today are three sort of essential, related, and really fascinating topics that make this so complex. We're going to talk about valuation issues, what's going on the ground, what's happening to values in both Palisades and the Eaton Fire areas. And we're going to hear from Charles Baker on that first. Then we're going to talk about sort of the looming monster, the gorilla in the room, which is the insurance issues related to this. We have Greg Econ with us today on that, and that is a topic that deserves its own 3-hour webinar. I think there's just so many moving pieces. Greg is going to touch on those. I'm going to let our speakers introduce themselves, and we're going to finish with a really interesting community effort that sort of formed out of a couple who lived a series of lots away from the western perimeter of the fire. They still live there, Alex Athison. And this really, I think, will top us off with, I think it's kind of the real mood that's behind a lot of these efforts to rebuild is hope. And Alex brings us a really interesting look at what hope can be like with architects. So we're gonna do that, talk a little bit about what he's up to. I'm gonna let Charles kick this off. Charles, tell us in the 20-second version about you, and then jump into your material. And thank you.
Well, I want to thank John and Steve, thank you very much for the invitation to speak. It's really quite an honor. I've done a lot of work in the fire zones since the fires, as well as in the Malibu fire zone after the Woolsey fire. So what I'm going to bring today is just a quick dive. Not going to get too far into the weeds, but what's happening in these markets, Palisades and Altadena specifically. Well, I woke up the morning of the fires to this scene. We have a little cabin in Lake Arrowhead, and the snow fell the night before. Um, Little did I know that 80 miles away, we would be seeing some of the most devastating fires in Southern California history. So, here's some stats on what's happening right now. Well, we know the Palisades fire burned about 23,700 acres. Pre-fire, there were 9,400 structures. After the fire, 6,300 were destroyed, or about 68% of the housing stock. So housing inventory dropped by about two-thirds. In the meantime, lot inventory jumped by an incalculable percentage. The Eaton fire burned 14,100 acres, about 15,500 structures pre-fire. 7,000 plus or minus were destroyed, or about 45% of the inventory. Insured losses are anywhere from 28 to $35 billion per risk. Total damage and economic loss estimates, and we'll be hearing more about this later, 250 to 275 billion, and that includes real property itself, property assessments, businesses, goodwill value, rent loss, payroll taxes, public infrastructure losses, etc. Just total. What I've been able to measure post-fire value losses are anywhere from 15 to 23%. This is in the tier one fire zone. In other words, this is remaining structures within the fire zone. Post-fire value loss for vacant lots, measuring anywhere from 23 to 32%, again, in tier one fire zones. We also saw a surge, post-fire value surge in areas like Brentwood and Santa Monica, anywhere from 10 to 15%. And of course, we saw a rental surge of about 15 to 20% in these affected areas. So let's move on here. Uh, what are some of the diminution of value factors that we're considering as appraisers? Well, there's neighborhood disamenity, visual scarring, debris, incomplete rebuilds. They certainly are reducing the curb appeal, and this will be a factor for some time. Market stigma, buyers and lenders' price and perceived risk of future fires, insurance hurdles, and construction inconvenience. Of course, we've got environmental stigma or adverse public perception. Those can persist even after the source of the problem has been remediated. Of course, the prolonged recovery period, this will be a multi-year construction effort with noise and traffic and service disruption issues. Safety and security concerns. Vacant lots can attract trespass and petty crime until the redevelopment really gets underway. And of course, there's reduced demand. So those are the factors that affect values. Personally, this is kind of a tough story to see. There's a house there, that White House, that's Tom Hanks' house. This is in the Palisades Riviera, and you notice the house right above it is completely burned to the ground. That was the Succession House, built by Artie Tavengarian. I appraised it three times during its 5-year construction phase. It sold for $83 million in 2021, and it's now gone. Briefly, these are some maps of the fire zones. The lower right corner of each of these, that's the fire map. The upper left corner are properties that I've actually appraised. Many of those are probably gone now. This is a map of Malibu. I've done over 350. And this is a map of Altadena, which I've probably done about 200. I'm sorry, let's go back here. So this is a map of active, pending, and sold vacant land in the Palisades area. Right now, there are 173 active listings. 13 are active and they're under contract. We've got 12 pending sales, and 43 of these have sold. So we've got about a 12-month supply at current absorption rates, and that's actually trending higher. Here's a chart of new lot listings on a weekly basis. The peak was in the second week of April with 28 new lot listings. And those are people that have just decided to bail. This chart shows the weekly median closed price for these are for vacant lots again. We're mostly level at about $3 million with slight variations. This chart is interesting. This shows the demand, or sorry, weekly sales after the fire. The Palisades experienced a 66% decrease in weekly sales after the fire. Brentwood experienced a 55.8% increase, and Santa Monica saw a 20% increase. So buyers are leaving the Palisades. I'm sorry, homeowners are leaving the Palisades. They're going to Brentwood, Santa Monica, the South Bay, Newport Beach, Orange County. This is a map of active, pendings, and solds in Altadena. And there's a different picture in Altadena, which I'll explain in just a second. So currently there are 82 active listings. 3 of them are under contract. We have 8 pending sales, and there are 107 sold lots. This already within about 4.5 to 5 months, which is interesting. There was a article, Steve, you pointed out to me yesterday in the Pasadena Star News about how a recent lotto winner is buying up vacant lots, and they're actually from the Altadena area, and they want to help with the rebuilding effort. So, good for him. Right now, there's about a 3.8 month supply at current absorption rates, and compare that with the Palisades, which is about 12 months. New lot listings on a weekly basis. The peak was in the 4th week of February with 22 new lot listings. This is weekly median sale price for vacant lots. We're holding steady at about 650,000, with a bit of a spike higher in the most recent week. One thing that's interesting to think about. The people that are selling are most likely the folks that either don't have the means or don't have adequate insurance coverage to pay for the rebuild, or perhaps they're elderly and just don't want to go through a 3 to 5 year period of time to fully realize their rebuild effort. The other concern that we're seeing is what is going to replace what was lost architecturally. Are we going to see kind of a brutalist style with not a lot of architectural interest like what was lost? That's a concern. We'll see how that goes going forward. So, what's next? What we're seeing is there's a steering committee consisting of 45 law firms that have been formed to coordinate all of the legal cases that are percolating up now. And what are some of the causes of action? Well, there's negligence. Plaintiffs, specifically in the lawsuits, allege that Southern California Edison was negligent in maintaining its infrastructure, failing to trim vegetation near power lines, and failing to respond adequately to high wind events. There are inverse condemnation claims. Some of these lawsuits are arguing that SEC's infrastructure functioned as a public improvement that failed, requiring just compensation. There's also a shareholder lawsuit because SCE assured shareholders that it could shut down power lines to reduce the risk of catastrophic damage, but they didn't. And of course, claims for damages involved with costs associated with firefighting, damage to public infrastructure, property damage, personal injuries, and other losses. On the slide, it talks about a 3-year contract that the LA DWTB has signed with Munger, Tolles, and Olson. It's a top LA law firm to defend the utility over the Palisades fire. They're charging close to $2,000 an hour for legal work. One thing that I read about was that they are relying on a 1911 California Supreme Court decision in Nyhouse Brothers versus Contra Costa Water in defense of LADP. And the theory is that this will pierce the inverse condemnation claims. And this is only in the Palisades. This is not in Altadena. And of course, personally, people that are involved in this have lost homes. 2 federal judges, they lost their own homes in the Palisades, and they've joined hundreds of others in their neighbors suing LADWP. So that's basically my presentation. Wanted to get just do a quick dive and analyze what's happening in the markets. I have doing a lot of work right now in the Palisades area specifically. I've got a number of casualty loss assignments. Those are going to grow algebraically. There's going to be a lot of that sort of work. There's going to be property tax assessment appeals. What's happening is the city of LA is considering resetting property tax assessments at existing land value. Of course, we're going to see a lot of claims from insurance companies and appraisal work that's going to be needed for that as well. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those now, or we can take those at the end of the presentation. Thank you, Steve.
We're going to push the questions to the end to try and get everybody's information in. We've got so much here, a lot of content. It's interesting to see that the market is behaving in a rational way thus far. And the other thing that's sort of heart-wrenching, an example is I spent 2.5 hours last Friday at a lunch with a mom with 2 small children who runs a nonprofit in town who's trying to decide what to do. And it was a complicated conversation, and these stories are, rewritten thousands of times. Every family, every home is a different situation. What bears upon that, so crucially, is insurance. We've got Greg Econ with us. Greg, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. I so appreciate your taking the time to be with us. And now let's talk about insurance.
You bet. Thanks, Steve. Greg Econ here, everyone. I have been in the business. This is my 50th year in the business. We are 3rd generation. Actually, my son joined us, and we are 4th generation in the business, 106 years. When I graduated from USC, I was accepted to Lloyd's of London and Cambridge University, where I studied at Lloyd's and learned about what the true inner workings of our business truly is. And Lloyd's of London being sort of the epicenter of insurance. I was an adjunct professor at UCLA teaching insurance for specifically property and construction liability for 30 years. And I was asked by Steadfast LA as well as ULI to chair and be a part of the insurance rebuild. So that's where I sort of landed in this particular instance. And Steve, thank you so much. And John, thank you so much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share some of the things that we've learned throughout this entire process. Suffice to say, the magnitude of damage here from a fire in a residential area such as the 3 that we've experienced is unprecedented. Yes, we've had huge fires in the past, Paradise and Wolsey coming to mind immediately, but these 2 have so much more complex conditions that we're dealing with from an insurance perspective that really has created a need for true creativity here. And what myself and my assistants have done is we've put together a program to be able to, for the people to be able to rebuild effectively and affordably. And what I mean by that is most insurance companies, as you know, had no interest whatsoever in writing, and the majority of the homeowners that we've met with were insured by the California Fair Plan, which, as you know, is the last resort. And it has very limited coverage. It has very limited limits. And those that had more traditional coverage were very fortunate in most instances. And it was really interesting. At the beginning of the first, say, 30 to 45 days, I was contacted by literally hundreds of people. And I attended one big homeowners meeting where there were 8 different insurance companies represented. The carriers themselves were not there, but all of the people that were insured by the specific companies were there. And 40% of those were the California Fair Plan. And that was a sad thing, quite honestly. But here's the good news. A modicum of good news in any event. In the first 30 days or so, we were hearing nothing but positive things from just about every homeowner, with the exception of those that were with the California Fair Plan, although some of those actually were pretty pleased as well. Depends on the coverage that they ultimately selected. But the issue was, first and foremost, the additional living expense, and that component is in each and every one of those other policies. And most of the people were very pleased with their carriers were saying, hey, just go get out here. We'll send you a check for $50,000 or $100,000 or $25,000, whatever the case may be, to get you at least on your feet and go get into a hotel or rent out an apartment, do whatever you have to do. So that was phase 1. And we were going, well, this is actually surprising. Well, phase 2, things started to change a bit. And that's basically where we are today. The carriers started saying, well, we want to see an inventory. And that's one thing we learned, very interesting component. when you have a loss of any magnitude, the first thing the carrier wants to do is, of course, be notified and want to get an idea of what the volume of the risk is. Well, part of that, of course, has to do with contents. They'll send you out an inventory list, and you're supposed to give a list of everything you had in that house so they could properly compensate you. Well, how do you know how many suits you had, how many dresses you had, how many pairs of underwear and silverware, and all the things that are in your kitchen and your dining room, your living room, and all over the house, the bedrooms, etc., the pictures? So if you have, one of the things we learned is if you can photo document everything, just take your phone and just walk around. There are a couple of websites out there. One's called Sortly, Sortly, and Sortly has a program where you can actually do this and document it and retain those for the future. So that's a very helpful site. There's another one being formed called Assurify, which we will ultimately publicize. But in the meantime, what are we going to do with the insurance now? The insurance carriers that we contacted understand that the risk today is actually a very good one. There's nothing to burn. Okay, that's the first thing. And obviously that's where we went into the marketplace. What we've done is we've really looked at it in different stages. The first stage is we've got to get builder's risk coverage, which is accessible, affordable, and broad enough. And so we went out into the marketplace, and after about 60 days, we have a carrier, one carrier thus far, and two behind them that are seriously considering coming on board, and we will have more. But the primary one, we've worked on the application, we've worked on the terms and conditions of the policy, and we're working on the rates. And I have all those three things basically solidified. The first and foremost and most important thing is I want to make this application available online for everybody. And if you, for example, lost your home and you want to be able to buy, you're going to have to buy a builder's risk insurance. So we want to make this so that it's easily accessible. You go right online, you fill out the application. The application is then reviewed by an underwriter, regurgitated back to you. You answer the questions, you get it back to them, and they will immediately give you a quotation. And if you accept it, which will be far, far less than it would be in anywhere else because we have some huge buying power here, obviously. You then just, the way we're trying to set it up is you can either Venmo or Apple Pay or pay with a credit card, and you will get a certificate of insurance and you're off and running with your builder's risk coverage. Not only that, but we've gone over the form itself and we've broadened the form to the greatest extent possible. Number three is once this is all done, the general contractor and the homeowner now have a policy that is a long-term policy. However long you think it's going to take to build this is the amount of time and therefore the amount of premium generated by that time that they will be on risk. Well, then we'll talk about what's going to happen when it's done. And that's sort of like the ultimate for us. Number two is now we've worked on that. We started looking at the liability from a general contractor perspective, and it didn't really make a lot of sense for us to put together a master program for that because there are too many disparate variables that we really couldn't get into because our goal here is to make it, again, affordable, accessible, easy to get on board, and make it very, very, very robust as far as all the coverages are concerned. So once that's done, that's your phase one. Phase two is what about the homeowner's insurance after this is all done? Well, with all the mitigation efforts that have gone in with by identifying the risk as it was and as it will be, we've met with several resiliency insurance groups, one called Earth Analytics Group out of London, and they have special risk mapping and risk management techniques and dynamic pricing and systematic risk pricing. All of these things will go into insurance carriers looking at risk in the future and recognizing that the risk in the future is going to be substantially different than the one prior to the fires. We're dealing with all sorts of resiliency as it relates even down to the vegetation, separation, materials going into the homes, sprinklers on the roofs, special vent protection, special eave protection, etc. So once that's all done, once we have our program in place, and it is in place for all intents and purposes, the last component right now is I'm trying to get AI, and we're working with Amazon in particular, trying to get AI to be able to read these applications, regurgitate it right back to the sender. Here are your questions. As soon as you can answer those, send it back in. We're looking for a quote to be basically generated at that point in time. It will be unprecedented. Nobody's ever done something like this. So we're really, the approach that we're taking is one that we hope minimizes the stress that everybody's going through. My family also lost a home, so I'm very much impacted by all of this. And and I don't want to start talking about that in particular, but most importantly, getting the homeowners programs and homeowners carriers, not just the California Fair Fund, but the true homeowners coverage available for everyone. And that's our ultimate goal. And how do we do that? Availability and affordability are the two issues. We will find carriers. In fact, some of the carriers that are going to be coming on during the course of construction are going to be most interested in providing long-term homeowners insurance at affordable and accessible rates. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any on the panel or the questions that come in.
Greg, thank you very much. I have to ask a question.
Sure.
And this is our big issue that we faced in Paradise and that California is facing, and it's becoming more of an issue in other states. California has lost 40% of its coverage, as I understand it, for single-family homes with the exit of State Farm and Farmers. Do you have any kind of a looking glass that can tell us what you think the arc of insurance availability and cost will be in California over just the next 3 years? What do you think?
I can't much speak to cost, but I can tell you why they left the state of California. All insurance rates are actuarially determined, and those actuarial components obviously take into consideration, most importantly, the loss history of the particular carrier. In the state of California, as an admitted carrier, which both of them are, you cannot raise your rates to get to the point where you're not going to be losing money. For every dollar they took in, they paid out $1.09. So how long could any carrier sustain that? So it really becomes a legislative issue where the Department of Insurance has to get involved and has to recognize that actuarially, this is the fact. You cannot argue with these numbers because they're huge numbers over a wide variety of losses and premium income over the last 3 years. So there's really no good answer for it right now, Steve, but the DOI has to get involved and has to recognize this and bring the carriers back into the fold. We will, with this particular book, all three of these burn areas, in my opinion, we will have carriers coming back into the marketplace because of all the, if you will, hardening that's going to be going on, including the brush clearance and all the different factors. We've even contacted private firefighters, having them on immediate call. We've done all sorts of things that nobody's ever done before. So it is going to be a different risk, and we will expect and require substantially lower premiums with broad coverage. That's our goal.
All right, Greg, thank you so much. Very helpful. And as we both know, this is a topic that can go on for hours. So our next speaker is Alex Atheson. And Alex and I met for coffee as a result of a connection through another counselor. And this is, again, the gift of being a counselor, is you get to know the most interesting, altruistic, engaged people. And Alex, why don't we just start with the morning of January 7th for you and your wife, how far away you are from Lincoln, talk a little bit about, what that is. And then let's just jump into how your life has totally changed since then and what you're doing now.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Steve, and thanks for hosting me and tell a little bit about our story and how the Foothill catalog came to be. So I'll share my slides here. So I'll first introduce the Foothill Catalog Foundation. And I think the value, and I think why this is an important topic to discuss, is really talking about the tangible and intangible aspects of this recovery process and the power that not only creativity and innovation can have in the rebuilding process, but also the power and the value of hope, optimism, and community buy-in as well into a real movement to rebuild not only individual homes, but a hometown. So the Foothill Catalog Foundation, we're a nonprofit organization that my wife and I founded right after specifically the Eaton fire. And our mission is to develop a collection of pre-approved home designs for displaced residents to affordably and resiliently rebuild while collectively retaining this community identity and this local architectural character. And so a little bit about myself and my wife here, Cynthia. Yeah, so Steve, we are, as you know, we are Pasadena residents. We are both licensed architects. We live up in Northwest Pasadena. We snuck in, we're about a half block south of the Altadena border. So we have that Pasadena address, but we really feel like we have a foot in both communities. And so, yeah, we are licensed architects, but more importantly, we're residents and community members of this proud place. And on January 7th, like so many of our friends and neighbors, we were coming home and watching the coverage of the Palisades burning, and around 6:30 p.m. saw that there was a fire starting in Eden Canyon. And by 7:30 p.m., as we were both coming back from work, the San Gabriels that we have a view of out of our mountains out of our window were completely on fire. And I think a lot of people share this experience of the terror that and the chaos that that kind of image created. And so my wife and I, we evacuated that Tuesday night, not knowing what would happen, packing a bag and not with not really much clarity on what the situation would be, and staying with a friend in their living room the next morning. We were watching the news like so many other people and just in shock and horror at seeing how far and how quickly the fire had traveled, and wondering whether our home would be okay. And around 10:30 a.m., as the news coverage was switching back between Palisades, Sylmar, Altadena, on one of these cuts, a reporter was standing on our street, on Montana Street, with homes engulfed in flames behind her. And at that point, we turned off the TV. We didn't need to watch our neighborhood that we love burn down on live television. And we kind of had to come to grips with in a few hours how what we were going back to, what community we were going back to. Thankfully, a few hours later, a friend who was driving around checking on other properties actually drove by our home and sent us this picture. And this our home still standing around 12:30. And it's a small home. It's a modest home, which a lot of these homes in this community are. And but it was our home and a place where we built our lives. So thankfully, we were able to move back in within a couple weeks. But now, as architects and again as community members, we were looking for how to address this problem of how to bring back our community and the people in this place that makes it so special. And so the risks that we were looking at as we kind of were as architects looking at this problem, the statistics of home building and what it costs in a typical market to rebuild, to build a single family home, you're looking at a cost per square foot of around $650 plus. And I think in this rebuild effort, that $650 per square foot is the floor of really what people are being quoted and what people are looking at for a custom home rebuild. And the time, as we touched upon, is also a big factor as well of I think it's been polled that 70% of homeowners might not return if the rebuild will take longer than 3 years. And so how do we make rebuilding attainable for everyone? I think, Steve, as you know, being a Pasadena resident, what's so great about this community, and Altadena too, is the diversity of people that are here and the diversity of place that's representative of those people. So how do we retain not only people in larger homes and people with insurance coverage, but people who are underinsured and of lesser means who have built their equity based on the depth of their roots and of their family and the generations they've spent in this place. And how do we build back resiliently too? I think it's such an important topic to try and imbibe predictability and resiliency at scale in order to make these communities stronger for the future as well. And Charles mentioned this too. I think a large concern is what are these places going to look like when we come back? What are the people going to be? Are we going to be able to retain the people, but also this really palpable sense of place and heritage and identity that's reflected in the architecture? How do we bring that back as well? And so our model for this is, what Cynthia and I kind of launched into, and what the Foothill Catalog is modeled after, is the predictability that the catalog home model can present. And this was popularized by the Sears catalog in the 20th century, which many of you might know. And it was an incredibly successful mechanism of producing modest but quality housing for working class people across the nation, and really was responsible for creating an incredible amount of equity for people and building out really well-defined neighborhoods across the nation, and especially here in Southern California. So in this disaster relief scenario, we think this model can be applicable again through a nonprofit mechanism called the Foothill Catalog Foundation. And so we launched the Foothill Catalog Foundation as a nonprofit organization the week after the fire, and essentially to replicate this model of predictability and imbibe the very unpredictable construction process to create efficiencies in design and permitting and construction as well. And so looking at some innovations in permitting, I mean, what we've worked on, we've great partnerships with LA County. LA County launched into this process too, looking for answers, looking for how to address the needs of the community. And as we were growing our message of pre-approved plans and this catalog approach, we connected with LA County and developed this innovative permitting mechanism called pre-approval. And so essentially it splits your typical building processes, your typical plan checks and permitting reviews into two separate processes, from pre-approval, which is looking at a full set of architectural, structural, and energy calculations that are submitted to the county and are reviewed without a lot in place. And then once a plan is pre-approved, it can then be marketed to a variety of different homeowners as a non-custom solution that meets a variety of different needs. And once a homeowner selects one of these properties, then you can move into post-verification and submit a site plan and really be as close as possible to obtaining a building permit and getting shovels in the ground as possible. And so ultimately, this is a way for homeowners to skip through, not have to go through a custom design process that ultimately can take years and tens of thousands of dollars, not have to go through an arduous permitting process, but really be able to get a head start in the design, permitting, and build period to get to a new home as soon as possible. And also matching the capabilities and capacities of all these different homeowners, thousands and thousands of people who are looking for homes, with the enormous amount of different builders, from nonprofit builders to large building organizations to local builders, to piece together various capacities with this one community resource that can be the Foothill Catalog. And a little bit, I won't get too deep into the numbers of the architectural kind of comparison of how architects, what the typical design fees that we can forego in a custom solution of going through schematic design, design development, construction documentation, the permitting process, and getting into construction administration. Typically, design fees are 10 to 15% of construction costs, and these soft costs are the barrier to even get to a building solution. So through a nonprofit mechanism, we're able to do that internally without a homeowner, and then be able to provide a custom or a non-custom ready-made solution to rebuild as quickly as possible. And a little bit about that timeline too. I think where we can give homeowners a head start is by skipping through this custom design and this arduous permitting process for a custom solution. And by providing predictability with a pre-approved plan that the county has reviewed and already given that first stamp of approval, we can save what we're assessing is about 93% on average cost savings in those soft costs at the forefront. And then that predictability of what we're providing in design and permitting also can carry through in predictability for builders as well, and make their process much more predictable to lower their cost per square foot of what we're targeting of around 400 per square foot is where we would love to get to as an average working with different builders. And also piecing together scale as well. I think this predictability of designs can really impact how builders are utilizing economies of scale and repeatability to not only build efficiently, but build quality as well. And so, update of where we are, I'll wrap up a little bit here, but, we're working on creating designs that are characteristic of the community. And it's really captured the imagination of what this rebuild can be for the community, for Altadena, and also in the Palisades. And working on modest homes, a scale from 800 square feet all the way to 2,000 plus. People don't need large homes, especially in Altadena. They're looking to rebuild what they had and just get back into their community. And also to touch on resiliency, I mean, building back resiliency at scale. All of our designs are meeting the very high fire hazard severity zone standards. So by creating this predictable resiliency that's baked into these models, we're able to provide that value as well. And so kind of wrapping up here, I think what our greatest value is not only these tangible cost and time savings, but also really the hope that we've captured and the trust that we've been able to garner in the community. And working with, this past Friday, we just launched and connected with this family that we're utilizing our designs that Habitat for Humanity will be building for families that have nothing, that are completely uninsured, underinsured, and otherwise would have no other options to stay in this community. So with Supervisor Catherine Barger with Habitat for Humanity, we just launched this first pre-approval that we received, the first pre-approved plan in the history of LA County. So for a small nonprofit organization that was founded by two local architects who are of the community, this is a really special milestone and looking to build upon that. And just to close, I mean, this is what keeps us going. This is what this is all about. It is channeling the optimism and the voice of the community to really create this movement of what this rebuild can represent. So a lot of technical work behind the scenes to make this model work. But at the end of the day, we want rebuilding to be simple and attainable, and really make the dream of restoring these communities possible. So with that, I'll close. Happy to get into any questions about our model, and here's a little bit of more contact of where you can follow along, reach out to us, or check out more on our website. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Alex. That next to last photo with Supervisor Barger and the family, I'm going to address our first question right off the bat with that. And the question, and this is from counselors on the call, or questions submitted prior to, has the pace of rebuilding efforts, despite calls for expedited processes, been slower than anticipated? If so, what conditions are contributing to complications and delays? And I want to answer this personally. The Army Corps of Engineers has performed a miracle in cleanup that was unprecedented. And I hate to use that word because we've been using it since the pandemic, but there's no record for it. In Paradise, it took months and months and months to clear lots. We are almost entirely done in both Palisades and the Eaton fire area. Supervisor Berger spoke at a community dinner I attended in February, and she said, we've just opened our permitting center. It was March. We just opened our permitting center in the community so people can come in and get plans expedited. And there was a family that came in with a set of plans they had already prepared. They were ready. They were way ahead of the curve. And when they submitted them, they asked the counter personnel, how long do you think this will take to get a permit back? And the response was, well, they're telling us 30 to 45 days, but it'll be 9 to 12 months. And there was a pause. The whole room of 250 people I was having dinner with groaned. And she said, I am happy to tell you that the individual who informed those homeowners is no longer under the employ of Los Angeles County. Pause. It will be 30 days. You heard it from me. They are working very hard. And in my mind, we've got something quite remarkable happening. So let's move on to some other questions. And this combines a couple of questions about rebuilding strategies. While the risk for the areas of the fires may be somewhat assuaged due to the burn of underbrush, trees, and structures, are there new safeguards that have been implemented to protect the remaining usable improvements and new homes? Are there safeguards being put in place for other high-risk areas in Southern California? Or is nature going to do what it wants to? Alex and Greg, I think that's in your wheelhouse.
I'll take it, Alex. Start
Yeah,
with,
go for it.
most importantly, all the elements that we discussed briefly earlier have to come into play as it relates in particular to fire resistance. So the homes today, the building department has certain requirements that they've imposed, obviously, and these requirements take into consideration, of course, the non-combustibility of the materials going into the rebuild. That's number one. Number two is when the homes are done, they're all going to be sprinklered indoors. They'll have sprinklers on the roofs. As I mentioned earlier, the eaves will be addressed. They will have a proper venting because many of the losses that took place as a result of the embers getting in the vents, and literally the home virtually would explode once that happens, especially the same thing with the eaves. The distancing, the fire resistive nature of the vegetation going in, and most importantly, the preparation, making certain that the surrounding hills, the surrounding exposures are minimized and taken care of and properly addressed when the time is right. So that's from our perspective, that's the best thing that we can do as respects ultimately getting homeowners carriers to have an interest in coming back into the marketplace and providing excellent, affordable coverage.
Yeah, and to add to that, as an architect myself, I mean, we look at resiliency in sort of three ways, and one is centered on the structure itself, and what Greg mentioned is just intelligence and how things are detailed, how things are designed, from attic vents to the way eaves are enclosed to crawl space access and venting, to the non-combustibility of your cladding or your roofing. And these are all addressed in the Chapter 7A of the building code that we are adhering to, and that will be required in these high fire severity zones. The second way of increasing this resiliency, and what's actually maybe even a larger part of what goes into resilient design, is actually the landscape design, the site design, and creating defensible space and not having brush or vegetation directly up against your home. And being able to provide fire breaks through vegetation while still able to maintain that verdant kind of atmosphere and identity that's really distinct in both the Palisades and in Altadena. And then third is really this resiliency at scale that I mentioned. That is really where there's actually an incredible opportunity now to rebuild more intelligently at an unprecedented scale and imbibe this community for resiliency and durability, and as well as sustainability and best practices of the intelligence that we now have in the 21st century in 2025, to really build back our communities to be more resilient for the next generations of residents that will be living here.
Steve, I have just a quick response to the question about nature. Nature is going to do what it's going to do. And we have to remember that before the Europeans came into the Southern California, the Chumash and the Tongva Indians, they would annually set small brush fires to clear out the underbrush, and they cultivated oak trees in these foothill communities. not palm trees or eucalyptus trees. So they knew from hundreds of years of experience that these fires are a part of nature. So they will happen again in the years from the 1936 to 1990. There were 10 major fires in the Malibu area. We just have to be cognizant of it. We have to build, we've got to harden our structures and clear out the underbrush. But it will happen again. Anyway, that's my
Yeah,
comment.
and you know, Charles, the interesting observation you had before is sort of a fear of brutalism. You know, concrete from the 1960s in rebuilds,
Yeah.
and the work that Alex is doing is a direct, an indirect, unintentioned response to brutalism. I mean, what I find as a resident of the area is, and I know this is in the Palisades as well, is the creativity and the sort of adhering to the tradition of a very eclectic neighborhood, and the variety of design ideas that they have is quite remarkable in actually replicating what was there and what still is there. And so the community will retain much of its original architectural character as a result of efforts like Alex. He's not the only person doing this. He's a terrific example of it. So here's sort of a serious kind of bigger picture question. And this is for anybody. Infrastructure restoration, including sewer and water lines in affected areas, is critical. What is happening to plans and timelines for restoring these essential services? So I'm going to let the gang jump on this.
Just briefly, 30-second answer. I spent a lot of time in the Palisades area. Utility crews are repairing all of the power poles, getting lines restrung. The underground utilities, the sewer and the water lines are largely unaffected, although they're doing a lot of trenching along Sunset Boulevard and checking and strengthening and repairing, doing repairs where needed. I was struck by how quickly after the Woolsey fire, SCE was in there replacing all the power poles. I mean, thousands of power poles were replaced within about 2 to 3 months. So that's moving forward with all due haste. And I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
Yeah, similarly in Altadena, I mean, I think yeah, SCE is working to use this opportunity to improve, to optimize the grid and underline a lot of or underground a lot of their power lines. And I know a lot of the other utility companies, the infrastructural requirements and opportunity to improve, they're looking to take full advantage of.
And that was something that happened as a result of the campfire in Paradise as well, was mandatory undergrounding. I think the undergrounding, Alex, tell me what you know. My understanding is it's more of a phase project for Edison now. I do know they have a lot of poles up, a lot of transformers up. I would guess they're well past 75% in terms of restoration. Any observations from you on that, or Greg for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely making progress, just as the Army Corps is making progress, and I think they're still figuring out then what is this long-term solution in terms of grid optimization, and then for sustainability, more resiliency in the grid itself, and that goes with what that process will be for undergrounding lines across the whole community, but also what that means for individual homeowners as well. So still very much in flux, and I know. They're trying to figure out exactly what their scope will be in this optimization process.
Right. Greg.
Pardon me? Oh, was that to me?
Yeah, I thought you had some input on this as well.
Yeah, and the entire process is looked at from the insurance perspective as a absolute vital necessity that all of these issues are addressed and addressed properly. We've talked about, underground utilities. We've talked about the hardening. We've talked about spacing. All those things are taken into consideration. But when you look at a risk model, they don't actually assign a percentage of risk to those particular entities or those exposures. So when looking at from a holistic perspective, we really look at the standard underwriting criteria, and that doesn't enter into it. It didn't prior to the fire, but in my opinion, it will post-fire.
Right, right. Okay, so Charles, here's one that they want you to answer. So pressure's on, but I think the group can handle it. Policy decisions such as foreclosure, moratoriums, and administrative actions also impact recovery efforts. How are the timelines and effectiveness of these measures? So what do you know about that area?
I really can't speak to that specifically. There's been a moratorium on property tax assessments until I think next year, 2026, per Governor Newsom. As far as foreclosures, I don't have enough data to be able to speak to that, but I can imagine that someone who bought a house and paid $6 million in the Palisades last year, and they've got a $4 million loan, and then the house burns down, the property post fire is worth 2.5. They're underwater to the tune of $1.5 million. Are they going to walk? Are their insurance proceeds going to pay that difference? What's their equity? How much equity do they have after everything's been settled out? Maybe zero, or are they just going to let it go and have the bank take it back? We're going to see all of these scenarios play out, but I don't have any specific data.
Yeah, again, the moving target. I'm just reading here. Okay, so this is a question that I think we may have has come up in every group setting I've been involved with in the fire efforts. And this is for everybody. Are there concerns about providing labor and commodities to address new construction, especially in light of potential tariffs and immigration issues impacting California? So there's an easy question, everybody. Take a stab at that one.
Quick.
I mean, what are you hearing? I'm interested in that. I think this is going to be our last question too.
30 seconds. After the Woolsey fire, we had in 2018, we had a 50% steel tariff back then. And the rebuilding effort was complicated by the fact that workers had to commute on average 1 to 2 hours each way just to get to some of these building sites. Altadena and the Palisades are a little bit closer, but the labor shortage is going to have a huge impact on these costs going forward. Alex, I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I guess if that's a yes or no question, there are concerns. I think what we're trying to do, right, and I think the construction process is so unpredictable. So by imbibing as much predictability into that process and the ability to collaborate at scale too, and sort of coordinate all of these efforts beforehand, right, in the design, in the planning stages, is really how we're looking to address some of those issues that are going to be inherent to this rebuild. That's really an unprecedented scale, and especially in this climate too.
And I'll just add one thing to it as far as the general liability is concerned. And that was, I mentioned earlier, that was one of the components, and it's one of the issues that the insurance carriers in particular were very, very concerned about, because we're going to be bringing in so much untrained labor, because we need labor, we need contractors, we need the workers. And so there's going to be a lot of if you will, contractors that haven't done anything to this scale before. And so they were concerned about that.
And as architects, we're also very concerned about that too.
Indeed, indeed.
Right. I think we're right down to the wire here, and I am exceedingly thankful for the participation of our speakers. It sort of feels like this is a stay tuned, that we're not done, and I think we've got a lot of ground to carry. There's a famous line from literature about this. Long way to go, much to do, and I think I'm thankful to all of you for your diligence in pursuing new ideas. Greg, some of your AI ideas, and I love this firm in Great Britain you're working with. Tell me the name of them again. I spent 20 minutes on their website the other day.
The name of what?
Of the firm in Great Britain that does the aerial imagery.
Fidelis and Earth Analytics Group. Fidelis
Earth Analytics.
And Earth Analytics Group is the one that's going to be doing the sort of like the satellite modeling and making certain that
Right.
if a fire is going to happen, they're going to know about it in advance.
All right, there you go, everybody. Check out Earth Analytics. It's fascinating. Again, thank you for your input, your participation. Terrific questions, and we'll kick it back to John.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Charles, Greg, and Alex. The stories of resilience, the path to recovery, reinvention, and models for rebuilding shared with us today and last week are truly transformative. And you and the entire Los Angeles community should be proud and commended. Thank you also to David Levy, CRE, and his team that arranges these webinars, and the CRE staff without whom this would not be possible. We have a busy July lineup of webinars, including programs on July 9th, 16th, and 23rd. Visit cre.org/events for details. Until then, on behalf of the Councils of Real Estate, thank you for attending this session of What's Next for Real Estate and the Life Experience.